Good afternoon. We'll call the committee conference on HB1 and HB2 to order. Gonna have my vice chair will be a little late. He's said he'd only spend 3 minutes on another committee conference, but we'll see how that works out. The legislative budget assistant, Mr. Kane, will walk us through what we have in front of us for presentations and working papers, and probably they'll be here by then, I hope.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Michael Kane, the legislative budget assistant. I just wanted to kind of go through the documents that the members on the committee or conference have in front of them. These documents are also on our website online, so the members of the public and other members can follow along. So the big bound book is what's called a compare report. So this is a side-by-side of the House proposed budget to the Senate proposed budget. Probably 1,500 pages of detail in the event you need to get into that level. I would say to go with that is the detailed change sheet, and that is a legal size paper. What this is any changes that you'll find in the compare report will be described and explained on the detailed change. So we think this is a more reader-friendly, public-friendly document to identify the changes that the Senate made to the House version. So I would say that the big binder and this detailed change go in conjunction with each other. Also, you have a small handout, House Bill 1 index. These are the sections in the back of House Bill 1, including your revenue estimates, including your positions abolished, any back of the budget reductions, and a side-by-side of each with the language. Just so the committee knows, there will be documents that you'll be getting regularly as you meet, as you make decisions on either the detailed change or on the sections in House Bill 1 or 2. What we'll do is we'll shade those sections out based on the tentative agreement of the committee and then provide that back to you, just so by the end of the process, you'll only have a couple items unshaded. And then the last is it's a document. This is a side-by-side of House Bill 2. So these are sections in House Bill 2 of the House and the Senate, along with the highlighted differences. Pretty lengthy document, and this is also online for the members of the public to follow along. Just general rules. Typically, what we ask is all items on the detailed change need to have a vote up or down by the committee. Nothing can be left on hold in House Bill 1 on the detailed change. It's the operating budget. It's all reflected in Section 1. So that's one item, that's one area where there'll have to be a affirmative or negative vote on each one. When we get to House Bill 1 and 2 sections, as we start shading these out, as the ones that are on hold remain, in the event that the committee does not come to an agreement on sections that are on hold, what will happen is that section will not be included in the final House Bill 1 or 2. So, and we'll keep reminding you as we go. We'll identify the items that are on hold, remind the committee that no action on this item will result in this being removed from the final bill. And so those are the documents you'll have in front of you as you discuss. We also have copies of a surplus statement. It's a letter size. This is something that we'll be updating on a summary basis going forward. So as the committee makes decisions on the various House Bill 1 and 2 proposals, and we will make sure that we track the dollar impact of those changes and report that to you and the public. And also the last handout you have is relative to revenues, but I think that's a one-page sheet that Chris Shea put together in the event that you talk about revenues today. So that's all I have for now. Behind me is the members of our staff. We have Chris Shea, Mickey Landrigan. I didn't forget Kevin's names. We have Kevin. Kevin Ripple, Melissa, and Rollins, and Jack Mullen. So for specific questions, if the Senate has questions on the House, or the House needs some clarification on any of the detail, these are the people who know all that detail. So, and they have microphones and they can help out. So that's all I have. If you have any questions of me, I can answer those.
Any questions from committee members? So we're going to have shortly on my House side, myself and Dan McGuire, my vice chair, Joe Sweeney, Jose Cambrils, and Mary Jane Wallner. We also have some alternates, and when we discuss the revenue, we'll probably swap Jose for John Janigian, who's the chair of Ways and Means and who brought us the guiding document that the House had to stick to, was what Ways and Means brought us, and that's our guidance for all we can spend, which is, at the beginning of the process, was over 700 million less revenue than what the governor had in her budget. And we made cuts as much as we could and changes as much as we could to try to get closer to that and see if we could bring in more revenue. So the big difference still between us and the governor and us and the Senate is revenue. So we've asked the revenue people to come before us and give us a quick brief. And I understand that insurance has some good news for us that may help close that gap on the revenue, because that's the first thing we've got to figure out. Before we know how much we can spend, we got to know how much we have. So thank you very much. And here he is. And if we have the revenue folks come before us, and Commissioner Stepp is here.
Do you want to put Janigian in from one of those?
Yeah, that's what they're doing. Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Lindsay Stepp, Commissioner at the Department of Revenue Administration. Mr. Shea assisted me with just handing out a one-page handout. I guess you can tell it's from DRA because it's in color, and that's different than what the LBA produces.
Very good.
So what you have here are the primary taxes that the Department of Revenue collects on the left-hand side. The first column is fiscal year 2024 audited revenue. The second column is fiscal year 2025 plan. That's the fiscal year that we're in right now. And then the first block of columns is fiscal year 2025 revised. And so here you will see the governor's estimate for fiscal year 2025, the House estimate, the Senate estimate is what is shown in yellow. And then you will have the DRA low and high. Chris, can I see that? I did. Thank you. DRA low and high for fiscal year 2025 based on May data. So as a reminder, what we do when we typically estimate revenues is we look at the current fiscal year, we estimate that as the base, and then we apply a growth rate to that base for 26 and then a growth rate again for 27. So with May data, we have 11 out of the 12 months. So at this point, we're really only estimating June. So that is a difference from when the House and the governor did their revenue estimates. They were looking at data only through January. The Senate had data through April, and now we have data through May. So you'll see a low and a high with May data for fiscal year 25. And to produce those numbers, we really just run a few scenarios where we look at how revenues have performed compared to plan, how they've performed compared to prior year, how the prior year actual looked, and we determine the range where we think we'll end up at the end of the month. Moving to the right, you will then see a block with fiscal year 26 estimates. Again, you'll see the governor in gray, the House in blue, the Senate in yellow, and then a DRA low and high estimate. To reach those low and high estimates, we apply the growth rates for each tax to the prior year. So for business taxes, we're estimating growth between 2 and 8%, and that's how we produce those ranges. Next column over is fiscal year 27. Same methodology applies.
Questions? Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. Where do the 2 and 8% come from? Is that just your standard practice, or?
So it is probably less scientific and more a general feeling of how we believe business taxes will perform. We look at how business taxes have performed historically. We look at a number of factors in the economy at the moment, such as inflation, such as tariffs, other things like that. We look at how revenues have been performing to date. As most on this committee know, revenues have been declining over the past year or so. However, we believe that we're at kind of a bit of inflection point with business taxes as businesses have been right-sizing their estimated payments after a prolonged period of there just being a lot of money in the economy. Those estimated payments have been right-sized. We saw pretty positive revenues in March relative to business taxes. April, we could definitely see some the uncertainty in the economy come through, but May, even though it's a smaller revenue month, those revenues did perform relatively well. So I do believe we are at an inflection point and revenues will grow in the next 2 fiscal years. To your point, Representative, the question is how much? 2% would be on the low end of growth that we see in an economy that is still performing well. 8% is a growth rate that we see when the economy, when we have a strong economy. And so where we go in the future is obviously unknown. And that's how we come up with those ranges.
I follow. So should we conclude that 5% is the most likely, or not necessarily?
Good question. So we do not run multiple scenarios and produce scenarios that kind of look like a normal distribution curve where the likelihood is greater or less than other scenarios. I wouldn't say necessarily that the 2 or the 8% or 5% in the middle is any more likely than any of the others. It really depends on how the committee feels about the factors in the economy and how those are going to impact the revenues. Certainly the middle is a safer area to place to be because the deviation from the bottom of the range and the top of the range is less, but it's not necessarily more likely than any of the other scenarios.
Okay. One more, please.
Further.
So let's talk about 2025.
Sure.
So here you have a range of 26 million between your low and your high, but the whole month you're going to get, what, 80 or so?
You're looking at business taxes
Business
in particular.
taxes, yeah.
So
We're still on that first line, I guess.
Sure.
Right? Yeah.
June is an estimate payment month for business taxes, so it's one of the months with 4 quarterly estimates. Estimates
I
are our
see.
largest source of revenue for business taxes. So just for discussion purposes, in fiscal year 24, business tax revenues for June were 170 million. In fiscal year 23, they were 175 million. So it's a relatively large, unfortunately, the last month of the fiscal year is one of our larger revenue months for the year. So there is a substantial amount of money due to come in this month. And so that's why the range is a little bit large.
Okay. Thank you.
This is my 15th budget. I don't remember 6% increases year over year in any of those budgets. I think that's rather extraordinary.
So looking back at revenue growth relative for business taxes in particular, if that's helpful. Business tax revenues, I'm going to kind of ignore the pandemic years
Yep.
because of the timing of revenues there. From fiscal year 15 to fiscal year 17 to fiscal year 18, business tax revenues grew 21%. From fiscal year 18 to fiscal year 19, they grew 8.4%.
I remember that. That's when we brought in a lot of overseas. Yeah, that was an extraordinary year. Because we stopped taxing people that had an overseas thing, but they brought a lot of profits on board.
We've also seen years where revenue has grown from 22 to 23. There was growth. 21 to 22 was 23% growth. 22 to 23 was 5.6% growth. So 8%, 6% higher end of the range. We've seen that in recent history,
Yep.
but not to say that it's not
Yeah, and
necessarily
that
an
could be
anomaly.
an extraordinary event we all hope for, but will it happen? I mean, I remember those years that all of a sudden all this money comes flooding back from overseas. It would have been heavily taxed, and all of a sudden the tax was vastly reduced. So a lot of money came in. Yeah, that was an extraordinary year.
And some of that was around the Tax Cut and Jobs Act in 2017, 2018. If there is, as you very well know, there's conversations happening in Washington to make that Tax Cut and Jobs Act permanent, which may provide situations or circumstances where businesses will be comfortable bringing money back from overseas, and we could see increased revenues because of it.
Representative Janigian, are you taking this all in, and what's your opinion?
Well, one of my questions was similar to Representative McGuire on when I looked at the $43 million change from low to high on 2025. I did think that was a large amount, but you answered that by the quarterlies are due June 15th.
Correct.
So that could affect that. And we did see April was lower than expected, and some of that timing wise was when the tariff talk was happening.
Correct.
And then we saw May kind of improve,
Correct.
not hugely, but it came about, I think, 5 million over. And as some of the tariff talk was getting tamped down or solved, or whatever words you want to use. So anyways, that question was answered. The biggest question mark, of course, ends up being, 2025 is almost done. Fiscal year 26 starts in 3 weeks.
3 weeks. Yeah.
So now the question more is on 26 and 27. And I think House Ways and Means saw that, yeah, we think the economy is going to slowly get better, but it takes time to get things going. So I think the biggest question mark here is that expected growth, high and low in 2026, and then of course 2027. So you've got, I guess if we look at bottom line numbers, you've got minus 3.6 as a low and 1.3 as a high. This was 6/8, I guess June 8th you redid this?
Mm-hmm.
And how do those numbers compare to what was there
Before? Sure.
before?
Looking at the ranges at the end of April, they don't change too substantially just because May is a lower revenue month. So we are picking up a little bit because of that performance in May, as you mentioned. So for instance, if you look at fiscal year 26, when we move from looking at data through April and we incorporate May data, the low end of the range was $1,085 million. And so now we're at $1,093 million. So the low came up a little bit. Alternatively, the high was at $1,191 million. and that came down to 1,185,000,000. So the range kind of contracted a little bit as as there's more certainty in the base revenues of fiscal year 25.
Your last figures there, what are you looking at when you
So
say
I am looking at business taxes
okay, business?
in the fiscal year 26 estimates in the
Okay.
2 columns on the right there.
Okay.
And I will just note for a minute, if you go all the way to the bottom, which I apologize, I think that's what you were looking at
That's what I was
originally.
looking at, yeah.
The minus 3.6%, that is largely due to the reduction in the interest and dividends tax because of the repeal.
Okay.
So you'll see that interest and dividends tax this year, we're estimating is going to be somewhere around 100 million, and that's going to go down to just under 10 million next year. So most of the reduction to get to that minus 3.6% is the repeal of the interest and dividends tax.
Okay. So are the bottom line numbers on the totals there, the low and the high, how do those compare to what we had back in?
Sure, previously. So at the end of April, the total low was 1,882,000,000. So now we're at 1,894,000,000.
Yeah,
And the high was at the end of April was 2,039,000,000, and now we're at 2,033,34,000,000. So the
that's-
high has come down a bit.
right. And that's primarily driven by the business tax
Correct. The
decrease.
reduction in the high on the business taxes. Correct.
Okay. And then I guess following that, we're looking at 2027, the total, if we look at the totals, can you tell us what those were?
Sure. So at the end of April, the total low for fiscal year 27 was 1,905,000,000. And now we're at 1,917,000,000. The high at the end of April was 2,164,000,000. And now we're at 2,158,000,000. So again, similar, the low has come up and the high has come down. The range has contracted a little bit.
And is that mostly due to what you saw in April? What happened in April?
With April and then the May data included. And as you said previously, for fiscal year 26, it's primarily due to business taxes. That's the largest source of revenue and where we have the largest range in our estimates. Most of the other tax types, the ranges are smaller.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Janigian, you have any recommendation from the House side of increasing what we started with originally?
Well, yes, so on the House side, in 2026, well, yeah, if you look at 2026, we have minus 3.9%.
Yep.
And again, keep in mind that we put this together in late January through middle of February, maybe later in February. So we didn't have the House Ways and Means didn't have the advantage of the latest data that's coming in. So we are thinking that minus 3.9% on the low side may be a little bit low, and we probably could modify that to say minus 3. I have another sheet here that I need to find. This copy that got passed out is a copy that I had previously and made some notes on. Let's pull this out. Okay. There it is. Okay, so actually, let me, it's a lot easier looking at what I wrote down before. So, so if we go back to 2025, the House Ways and Means, I think it would be legitimate to we're 8 million below the DRA's low estimate there, and so at a minimum, we could add 8 million in 2025. And as we go to 2026, yes, so that was the note I made. So instead of minus 3.9, I think right now I'd be comfortable with minus 3, which is roughly 20 million. And then so that's, say, 8 and 20, 28. There was 15 million more in, is it lottery? Insurance, that's what it was, thank you. Yeah, 15 more in insurance. So I wrote down here that we could, that's about 45 million additional. I mean, there may be, if the lows, and if we increase the low a little bit, possibly in 2027, I think right now, our initial analysis from the House would be that we could probably add about 50 million,
How much, 50?
about 50, yeah.
Okay, good. Now, are you including the insurance tax that we
Yes.
just heard about recently?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, because that was a surprise that they,
Now that, actually, the other thing is, Representative McGuire, we had talked about, you guys had added the 10 million for the lottery for each year, but it's not reflected in the House number.
because,
It's an adjustment, I think, right?
Yeah,
Not,
it's-
so it's not on this page, it's on the next page.
It's, okay.
Right.
it's on
Yeah,
the-
as
it's
you
on the
have told
adjustment,
us.
So,
you've got to make your estimates based on current law.
right.
But if we pass something like an increase in lottery, then we'll take that into account.
No, that isn't what I'm talking about. We, Director McIntyre had come in after we had put these numbers out and felt comfortable that there might be roughly 10 million at this present stage, based on what he's saying, about 10 million per year. So that's another 20 million. I'm
Added
not
to the
including
50.
that 20 million with the 50. So really, we're more like 70 million. Just let him figure it out.
All right, that's it. That's what I'm hopeful that we can close this gap we have between
Yeah.
the House and the Senate, because it makes a big difference in what we're going to do with the budget.
Right.
Okay. Now, so we've already taken care of the insurance, or is the commissioner here? Yes,
He's in the back. Yeah. How about more questions on,
yeah,
yeah.
sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to give you a heads up on how we got to the numbers the Senate got to. The first benefit, when we're talking about just about business taxes, you'll see we ended up already $40 million ahead on business taxes just for 2025 as a new base to start looking at the future with, right? If you look at the business taxes from the Ways and Means number, done on 2/11, it was $1.03 billion. However, the Senate having the advantage of a few more months with revenue and everything else, we started our base higher, which then establishes a new base going forward for everything else as we're looking at differentials, because we started at a new base. We met with Commissioner Stepp and went through the numbers, and then Ways and Means voted on those numbers. But then we had a follow-up meeting when the commissioner had more time with the revenue to be able to say, okay, we waited till late May to have another meeting just before the Senate Finance Committee was going to meet. And I met with Commissioner Stepp and I asked her, I'm like, can you relook at the numbers for the meeting? Tell me which taxes you think are legitimate to change based on what you see now with 6 more weeks of being with the data. Commissioner Stepp came back with 3 recommendations for changes from the Ways and Means, Senate Ways and Means committees. They were in business taxes, number 1. And the basis for that decision was multiple. It was the current feeling that by the end of December, the noise surrounding tariffs and everything else were going to be gone. That would be all settled out. We see it starting to settle out now with at the federal level and those things, and we were going to be normalizing that trade. With that, we also combined that conversation with what was going on in the economy, with conversations with the Fed and its interest rates. We know that businesses last year or last summer held back on growth expansions because inflationary rates were so high and interest rates were so high that they held off on doing projects. We had multiple businesses talk to me about the fact that we were going to do this large growth, but we didn't do it because the cost of borrowing money was too much. And therefore, we're holding back the idea and to see what the economy is going to do. And we know now that the Fed is going to be looking at least probably 2 consecutive interest rate reductions at the federal level. The conversation, the question is how big, whether it's a full 1% or whether it's only a half a point each time. But we do know that it's going to happen. They've indicated that they're going to lower the interest rate, which will drive down the cost of borrowing money, which will drive down the inflationary rate, which will allow these businesses to continue to grow. So therefore, we see that in the second half of the first fiscal year, we expect growth to start taking off like it normally did, because these businesses are now able to invest in their businesses using and grow their businesses. So that was the basis for moving we started at a higher base, and then we started looking at all these federal factors, inflationary factors that are happening and what businesses were saying. So again, she said comfortable moving from the original Ways and Means number up even higher based on those things that are settling down and calming down and businesses being more confident in the economy. And we expect the second 6 months of 2026, fiscal year 26, to be much stronger than the first 6 months. The second one we talked about was the rooms and meals tax. It's one of our stronger taxes that have been performing really well. The commissioner brought in Kiplinger's report that again was focusing on the fact that internal travel was going to be much higher this year in 26. And we expect less international travel, much more internal travel. So again, people from New England coming up to New Hampshire. It had a specific call out to economies that were focused on outdoor activities. So our mountains, our lakes, skiing in the winter. So it had a specific call out saying industries that have that or states that have that are going to be doing much better. And so again, it allowed us to increase revenues from the Senate Ways and Means position in finance to even more revenue. And then the last one we called out was a real estate transfer tax. Again, this had to do with federal changes going on, and the fact that, again, with the Fed looking at lowering interest rates, that will have an effect on mortgage rates. You combine that with the fact that the real estate is starting to talking about Zillow is in their last study reported that they expect home rates to drop in the next 12 months by almost 10%. And as prices of homes drop and combined with the dropping of mortgage rates, you're going to see, again, an upswing in selling of houses. There are a lot of people like myself sitting on a house with a 3% mortgage rate, even though I don't have any kids in my house anymore. But I'm not going to go take a 7% mortgage rate on a new place that's smaller. And so I'm sitting on my house. And I think a lot of New Hampshire citizens are in that position where they're sitting on a low mortgage rate and they're not going to sell their house, even though they might want to and downsize, because the place they got to go is going to cost them too much money. And so the commission and I also felt that the real estate transfer tax was going to pick up based on the lowering of the prices of homes over the next 12 months, combined with the lowering of mortgage rates, that the real estate transfer tax should see a bump going up. So those are the big three that I sat with the commission. We went over and why we justified those increases in those rates. And everyone, I asked the commission, are you comfortable with this number? Is it a number that is achievable, that we're not going to fall short of? And she was comfortable with those changes on all three of those taxes.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Commissioner. And I think the insurance commissioner is here, and he was going to give us some news. Thank you for bringing us some good news.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. DJ Betancourt, I have the pleasure of serving as the Commissioner of the New Hampshire Insurance Department. So in terms of the substance of our revision of the insurance premium tax estimate from the House phase to the Senate phase, I've passed out a letter which I know some of you received previously that explains the substance of why those revisions were made. But I think it might also be helpful to explain a little bit of the timeline that led up to the letter and ultimately the decision that we made to revise the estimates upward. So going back to January, it has always been the practice of the department to provide estimates that are conservative. I have been in the chairs that you now sit. I understand that this is a difficult and laborious process. It is always advantageous to be in my position now in coming to you to say, we have additional revenue to provide to you, rather than coming to you later and saying, we didn't quite make our numbers, you're going to have to find that shortfall somewhere else. So we've always come in with fairly conservative numbers. But what drove the numbers that we provided initially to Chairman Janigian in the House Ways and Means Committee was a situation involving a large insurance carrier insolvency in North Carolina that implicated state law as it pertains to the Guarantee Association, which is a entity that is formed to maintain and run a guarantee fund, which is technical, I appreciate, and Amy Duhame, our head of our IPT unit within the department, can explain it in detail if you're interested. But that's basically the association and the fund that kicks in when an insurance carrier goes insolvent. But as part of that, there are payments that have to go out to carriers when a large insurer of that kind goes insolvent. So that led to even more cautious and conservative revenue estimates. We began to get an indication that the hard market, and very, very briefly, a hard insurance market is when the demand and need for certain types of insurance coverages is at traditional levels or higher, but that access to that coverage is more constricted. And so at that point, you have a basic supply-demand dynamic that takes hold, such that what is left is more expensive. Now, on the surface of it, that would suggest to you that the IPT would go up because it's based on the cost of premiums. However, it does not take into account the reaction to that consumers will have. And so in traditional hard markets, what happens is that as insurance premiums go up for homeowners insurance coverage, auto, life insurance, all those types of things, consumers, particularly those who are cost conscious, will make decisions such as seniors will allow their life insurance policies to lapse because they've gotten to a point where they've determined that they no longer need it. Individuals who have multiple cars within their household will say, you know what, I'm going to let that nice car that I only drive in the nice weather during the summer just sit in the garage this year, and I'm not going to insure it. So there's a calibration there. And that has been fairly consistent when you have hard markets. But we began, as I said, to see, I want to say, I'm going to put it sometime in early March, we began to see that it was not playing out as we typically would see. And part of that was because we have a new software, the tax team does, that allows insurers to file their IPT obligations electronically so that we're seeing the revenue come into the department in real time rather than having to wait for the paper checks to arrive and add them all up and then cross-check that with who has and hasn't paid. So we were able to see much sooner in the process for the first time where we were, and we were seeing that we were going to be significantly above where we projected to be. So as a result of that, I happened to attend an annual conference of the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. And I talked with a number of my fellow commissioners across the country because I wanted to understand if New Hampshire was an outlier in seeing this trend or if this was part of something bigger. And of all the commissioners that I talked to across the country, the reaction was the same, which is this is a very unique hard market. We are seeing the exact same thing. It's not playing out the way we would typically expect it to play out. So at that point, I became a little bit more comfortable that we hadn't blown the call individually ourselves, but that this was something unique and different. And so by the end of March, again, because of that new software, we were able to see that we were going to be significantly over when all of the dust settled. So it was at that point that I had written this letter back on April 14th to say, look, things have changed, the facts have changed. It is really important to not only me, but to the department that we are providing all of you with the most accurate information that we possibly can. It is important to me that the department maintains its credibility, so we needed to make an adjustment. And so that, again, motivated the letter. The specifics of what I've just described are outlined in that letter. And so that's the reason for the change. Hopefully that is helpful to all of you.
It is.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Questions? Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. Let's talk about fiscal year 25, because that's where the biggest difference is between the House and the Senate. And there's only 3 weeks left, right? So there's a $24 million difference there. What's the source of that?
Well, I think, again, a lot of the same dynamics took root. And let me just note that we, in fact, came back to the legislature last year to revise the fiscal year 25 number upward. That was our first indication that something may have been a little bit off in our analysis, again, of this particular hard market. But I was not prepared at that time to say that it was going to be so different from the traditional hard markets that we had seen in the past. Again, it was not until late February, early March that it really became apparent that we were dealing with something that was quite unique. And again, I described the process by which I went and confirmed that what we were seeing was not only playing out, but that it was not anything specific to New Hampshire, that this was something that was impacting the country at large.
Okay. And then you're predicting that in the following year, it's actually, the market is declining, right, by 9 million. So why are people buying less insurance next time?
So it's not so much that people are buying less insurance, although again, as I've said, you can't completely discount the fact that some of the consumer behavior will kick in at some point when costs and premiums reach a point at which they're going to start making different choices. Rather, what that speaks to is, again, the dynamic with that large insurer that went insolvent down in North Carolina, not here in New Hampshire. We haven't had an insurer in New Hampshire go insolvent since the early 90s. We're very, very proud of that. But what that triggers, again, is for every state to engage with their guarantee fund law, which, and again, Amy can explain this much, much better than I. But what it involves is there being payouts to carriers that contribute into that fund to account for that insolvency. So we did not want to discount how that's going to play out. And what I mean by that is, under the law, those carriers have 5 years by which to apply into the department to get their payout that they're entitled to under the law as a result of that insolvency. So we're doing our best to figure out when in that 5-year period it's most likely the greatest number of carriers will come forward looking for that payout. We suspected that to the extent that there is a year that's going to be heavier in that regard than others, it would be that fiscal year.
One more. So are you saying that because somebody in North Carolina went out of business, we gain, and that gain took place in fiscal year 25?
It is not that we gain, no. It is that we have to account for the fact that there will be payouts that will have to go to the insurers that are going to impact the IPT. Where we certainly do gain, and this is an area where decisions that are made in places like Massachusetts, California, New Jersey, and the like, that we would typically look at and think we ought to maybe do the opposite, come into benefit New Hampshire, is with our retaliatory tax provision, which is to say that when they raise their insurance premium tax rates in those states, we're going to tax their domestic insurance carriers who are doing business in New Hampshire at the same rate that those states are taxing our domestic insurance carriers. So when those states decide that they're going to raise taxes, it benefits New Hampshire. Again, we can't exactly account for what each state is going to do, but there are certain trends that we see from time to time. So we factor that in as best as we can as well.
All right, thank you.
Questions from the committee members? So Representative Janigian, you're happy with like another 70 million over this biennium that we're looking at?
Yes. Yeah.
Appreciate that.
But I do have a question on the insurance tax.
Yep.
I guess it's more directed at, given that, let's see, for 2025, Commissioner, did you have a final or an estimated number for 2025?
Was the 174?
She can turn her mic on right from
Oh,
where she
yeah.
is.
Amy, go right ahead. This is Amy Duham again. She leads our IPT division within the department.
Welcome.
Thank you. So yes, we're expecting probably 175 to 176 million at the end of the fiscal year.
Very good.
Okay, thank you.
Further?
And so for the house, we had 150. Again, this was close to 4 months ago now that we had to come up with that number. So we added an additional 15 million for 26. That 15 million I talked about was for 26 and 27. Now I'm looking at 25. If 25 is going to come in at 175 or so, and the house was at 150, that's potentially another 25 million. So
That's included in the 70 we talked about,
it's
right?
not included.
It's not included?
No,
So you want to make it
because
higher?
we weren't aware of this number.
All right, so you want to add that to the 70?
So we'd add that to the 70. So now we're at 95 million over our total.
All right. Always good to close the gap, but
Yeah.
we got it.
Helps.
Presumably we'll have to go line by line and say, we accept the Senate's insurance numbers or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that's the recommendation.
I am
Okay,
happy that we were able to help, Mr. Chairman.
Mhm. Thank you.
I am too.
I'm a prideful guy just like anybody else. I don't like to be wrong, but in this case, it'll work just fine.
You've been in the job a while. I think you know what you're doing.
I try. I learn every day.
Very good. All right, so we need to adopt these numbers.
Well, I want to hear from the Senate
Senator?
whether or not we believe that we've made enough of an adjustment on the Senate side for the insurance stuff to come to an agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, I think I agree obviously with the commissioner, the numbers we have, the 165, and well, again, we start with a different base, right? Our number is 174 versus the House's base of 150. So we're starting a little bit higher to begin with. But I do think the 165 for 26 and the 168 for 27 are the right numbers for the insurance department.
I heard him say he was bringing his base up from 25.
Well, this is an interesting issue now that we've got this new, this 175, because now if we're bringing the house, if you look at the insurance tax line, FY 25, 150 to 175, then we go to the next line, 2026, as per this letter. We've got, the house says 159, so per the letter, he's assumed, well, no, I guess we kind of added that in when I said 15 more
Yeah.
so we've already added that in, so, yeah. So we don't, we wouldn't add more there. The only, right, yeah, actually, I think that's covered. The big thing that we were missing before was 2025, not having a good read on that.
So if
So
we
we
were,
added 25 for fiscal year 25.
all right, if we go 175 for fiscal year 2025, and then what would we go for fiscal year 2026?
160.
20, we go with the commissioner's letter here, which would be 165.
165.
And then the 2027 would be 168.
Okay,
Instead of 163.
very good.
So, Mr. Chair.
I'm not trying to do the math.
Nope, yeah,
I'm going to depend on Senator Lang.
All right.
so again, we're going to increase the 2020, accept the new number for 2025 from 174 to 175 for 25, and then leave the two Senate numbers and accept those two numbers. correct?
The numbers we're working on for this budget is a 2026 and 2027.
Right, so it's the 165 and 168. We'll accept those two numbers, but again, the changing the 2025 number also starts changing calculations for LBA in terms of
how
the
much
surplus fund and how much is going to go into the rainy day fund.
Right.
So
Will-
if we
will affect that.
So we're going to do 175 for 25, and then 165 for 26, and 168 for 27.
Well, from the Senate side, that's a $1 million increase.
I
On the
understand
Hou-
that.
on the
That's,
House
that's
side,
what the
it's
chairman said based on Amy's statement of it. We're going to be at between 175 and 176 for the
Yeah.
year. So I think he's increasing the revenues for 25 by $1 million based on Amy's statement.
So are you at the same number as?
Yeah, we're at the same numbers
Yes.
now, because we're at 175, 165, and 168.
All right. House members in support of that increase?
Yes.
Senate
Yes.
members, are you support? Okay,
Very good.
got an agreement on insurance.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so that's one piece of it, and the other parts you added were that totaled 95 million more than what we started at,
This
including this change.
Including this change, yeah.
We'll probably have to go business, then room, line by line.
Yeah, yeah. So on the business taxes, did you want to go any change there?
Well, excuse me, part of what I mentioned before, we did increase the business tax by going from, oh, no, wait a minute, I'm sorry. That was the total. Let's see. I was looking at the total for 2026 when I changed minus 3.9% to minus 3%.
Okay,
We'd have to look at what that means.
you don't have all the lines ready yet?
No.
All right. But we can be fairly confident that they'll add up to 95 million more than what we started with,
Right.
which is a big help. Okay.
Senator Lang?
Thank you.
comment
So,
on that?
thank you. So again, I'm I'm confident in the Senate numbers for, again, those three taxes that I worked with the commissioner on specifically that we talked about, the business taxes, the rooms and meals tax, and the rent tax. So again, based on the Senate numbers, again, I'm confident based on what's going on in the economy, and across the board. We heard about the making permanent the tax cuts that were done by President Trump in 17 or 16, keeping those going. So again, I think that we had the benefit in the Senate of starting with a higher base. The 2025 numbers came in higher, where the House started at 1.03, we started at 1.07. So we had a $40 million bump right off the gate to start our new numbers. And then we based it on those numbers, traditionally what goes on. You'll notice that if you look at the commissioners, the colored chart on business taxes, the commissioner, the 2025 number we use is actually a 1.6 million lower than the commissioner's lowest number. So again, I think the 2025 number is going to be the most accurate to start the base from. Because we know that the commissioner said the DRA low was 1.071 million, and I did 1.070 million. So, so we were starting below the commissioner already, and then we grew our base from there, based on everything the commissioner. So, I'm very confident in the Senate numbers for both the business tax, and we can talk again if we want to go individually by rooms and meals tax and rent tax, why. But again, it all started on the fact that I think we had more time with the data, so we had a better base to start with.
Representative McGuire?
I don't think we can go as wild on 2027 as you are, 9.8% increase. I mean, this is way outside the DRA's range.
I think there's a math error, because if you look, the DRA high at 8% is 1280, and I'm below that number. So there's a math error in that cell somewhere, because there's no way if 12.8 is an 8% increase, that my number below at 1235 is a higher percentage.
All right, so I think what's going on there is the 8% is 8% of the DRA high in the previous year. So it's high from the previous year plus 8% becomes high in the next year. Right?
Right.
So,
For that number, I'll ask Grant to contact the DRA to make sure if there is a math error in there. I said, oh, they're still here. All right.
uh, right, but
That chair over there has a mic.
if you look at, for example, 2026, the number in yellow, the Senate number, add 10%, that's where you get to 1235. You see what I mean? So it's each column is its own base, sort of.
Yeah.
That's correct. So the Senate number is within the range, but because your estimate in 26 of 1125, in order to get to 1235, that is a 9.8% growth. It's still within the range provided, and so that provides me with the level of comfort that I gave you, Senator Lang. The Senate approached the estimates in a slightly different way than the House in terms of building them. Rather than selecting year over year growth rates, you spent some more time talking about specific numbers. So the methodology for producing the numbers was slightly different between the House and the Senate, but ultimately the number that the Senate landed on for fiscal year 27 is within the range between my high and low. The methodology for getting there was just slightly different than the House.
Representative Janigian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing that we may need to look at further is that for 2025, in my initial calculations here, I said we'd go up 8 million, but I think we need to look at the business tax here from Ways and Means from, again, this is early February, so, you know, the data's changed, but in early February, we estimated 1.03, and now DRA is basically saying the low is 1.07. Yeah, am I looking at it? Yeah, 1.07. So given that if that's where the numbers are, then for 2025, we may have to add 40 million to be at the low there. So I had said, you know, 8,000 before. I rounded that to 10. If this is a $40 million difference, we could add another 30 million for 2025. Does that make sense to,
Yep.
for the House?
And so what would you say for 2025? What would your figure be?
Okay, so now for 2025, the bottom line
1.07?
total is going to be,
So John, are you going to do just
Let's
the
do
business tax?
business.
Let's stick to just the
Stick with
business taxes.
Yeah.
yeah,
But that
so
new
just
num-
so just the business taxes would be, yeah, just the business tax would be 40 million. I was subtracting the 10 before if I was looking at the bottom line, because I
So
already
you're
added 10.
starting at 1.07 for 2025?
Correct.
Okay, and then what would you go up for 2026? Which is
Well,
below
now
that.
we have percentages here, so we're not necessarily changing the percentage, because House Ways and Means thought that the growth would be 2.9%.
Yep.
But now that number that's reflected there is wrong, because now it's 2.9% of 1.07.
Yeah,
So we need to calculate that.
Commissioner Stepp, did you have input? No.
No, I think someone just needs to do the math.
Point.
So Representative, we are going up 2.9%. They want to go up 5.1%.
on business
In,
tax,
in,
yeah.
in business tax in fiscal year 26. Are you comfortable splitting the difference and saying 4, or are you not? Is it?
So, Mr. Chair, if I may. So
Yes.
again, if we look at just using the 2.9 over the base of 1.07, the House number would be, if we stayed with 2.9, would be sitting at about 1.101. That's a 2.9% increase.
Yep.
So if you
Getting pretty close.
it's getting pretty close to the 1.125 number that the Senate was at.
That's the 2.9% increase over the 1.07.
Is 1.101.
Yeah.
And then if we do,
And then you've got to do 4%. Yeah, then 4% on that number.
second,
And what would that give us on 2027?
I'm not mathing right today. Give me a minute.
He's doing it on his, say the number? But 1.145 for 2027,
Yes.
using his growth rates that he's got, 2.9 and 4.0.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Now hit,
I'm sorry, what was the new number? Someone came up with it?
1.145.
1.145? That's higher than our number.
Oh, that's for 27.
that's 27.
Oh, okay.
26 is 1.101.
Yeah, he's not quite up to yours yet, 1.23.
Basically, we were talking about splitting the difference between the House and the Senate on revenues in 20, to start with 26, if I'm not mistaken, between the 2.9 the House was at and the Senate was at 5.1, is finding a number, a percentage between there that we'd all be comfortable with.
Yeah, at this point, it's coming down to growth rate.
Right,
Growth
it's
rate
about
more
growth
than
rate. What do we think the growth
Yeah.
rate in 26 is?
Right.
All right.
I'll be,
mean-
Mr. Chair, again, I'm confident in the Senate's numbers based on my conversations with there. I think we're going to see significant growth. The one thing that drove this last year's tax revenues is, again, having been in the House since 17 and now in the Senate, almost every year we've changed the tax rates. Every year there's been something shifting. And I think what we're seeing now is the normalizing of the tax rate. All the softwares have gotten normalized. We know what the base is looking like now. So, and we're in a good shape. So again, I think as that goes forward as a normalized number, I don't think we're going to see the 20% numbers because a lot of those were based on estimates that were submitted and we saw a large growth of revenue going in. I think instead we're going to still consistently see about a 5% growth. I think the first half of the year is going to be, we're going to see shorter growth, but in the second half of the first year, we're going to see much stronger growth. I mean, again, not to get political, but we're political. If we believe in what we voted for in November, which was America's going to come back stronger, better, and greater, make America great again, then we're going to see the economy picking up. We're going to see the economy moving. We're going to see these tax rates and these tariff rates cause the New Hampshire, the United States economy, and in comparison to the New Hampshire economy, grow. So I think the 5.1% is a reasonable number for us to talk about what's going to go on in the next 2 years.
Remember, he's talking with 20 people. You're talking with 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So, and he's got a pretty good record.
Michelle, let's remind you again, I spent all
Just
3
my
terms on
answer.
Ways and Means in the House, and I think with Norm Major, I'm pretty sure I have a good record too.
And just not necessarily to remind the chair, but to remind all the audience that he is the chair of the conference committee, but there are 2 separate committees, okay?
Yes.
And the Senate has to agree among the Senate, and the House has to agree among the House. And unless we both get to yes, we don't get to yes.
True.
Right.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Janicki.
Yeah, so in general principles, Senator Lang, I don't disagree with what you said. It still comes down to the percent. One of the reasons we're at 2.9% in growth over 2025 for 2026 is because fiscal year 26 starts in 3 weeks. And we believe that the first 6 months of that time, we're still getting going. We don't see huge growth yet. I think it's coming. I think, there's some principles at the federal level that are going to help us. But I think it's going to take 6 months until you start seeing that. So I almost feel like at 5%, you guys are looking at the whole year, but half the year's used up. Half fiscal year 26 is going to be used up until you start seeing more growth. And that's why, because we think growth's fairly flat for the 6 months, then you're at you know, so the average, and maybe it's going to be 5% at the end of those 6 months, but that, or 6% even, but that's why we ended up at about 3%, because it takes time. So I think you may be a little optimistic too early, possibly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, so I think the growth rate for the first 6 months is going to stick around 2 to 2.5%. That's where we've been. It's where I think we're going to stay. But I think it's going to accelerate in the second half. Mr. Chair, just to kind of cut to the chase here, if the House would agree to a 4.5, we can probably stop talking about this and move.
Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think I can agree to a 4.5%. I'd want to be optimistic about where the economy is going to be going. But in the position that we're in, we're safer to assume the lower growth rate. And worst case scenario under there, if your growth does come in where you project it to be, agencies, departments can go to fiscal in the second half of the year, in the second year of the biennium, and access the funds that we're collecting over and above our expectations. So I think we're to urge on the side of caution for an ambitious growth rate and settle. I think Representative McGuire's suggestion was on under 4% or around 4% for a true middle ground between 2.9 and 5.1. So I'd be closer to 4% than 4.5.
Okay, Mr. King, just to correct what Representative Sweeney said, it's more difficult to come in if the money is not budgeted to come into fiscal and ask for more, because it takes more than that. But in the Senate provisions that we put into the budget, we allowed them to come in and ask for more money to reverse a back of the budget cut. And that would be possible through fiscal, but not to come in for brand new money that isn't budgeted. Am I correct?
You're both correct. So there is a Senate provision relative to a back of the budget reduction, it's removing that. But there are also, as you go through House Bill 2, you'll see there are provisions specific for agencies, not all agencies, HHS, corrections, that the legislature may allow them to come back into fiscal for additional funds above and beyond the budget if it's not appropriate. So both could be done, but very specific to the agencies that come in for non-budgeted spending.
Thank you.
Jill, meet me halfway. 4.25.
4%'s halfway, my man.
You're at 4. I'm at 5.1. I offered 4.5. So
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
It may, help us if the chairs of Ways and Means of both the House and the Senate get together, independently and consult with their respective committees and come back. Because if the first one, give $1 million, take $1 million, okay, on the first one, if we have some of those similar ones that are down through, we can agree on the big number, the bottom line number, and not necessarily agree on every line number that's in there, or come to an agreement that gets us to that agreed on grand total. So at this time, I mean, we've seen the arguments that we're having over this particular one. I would think that might be advantageous to us, is to have them meet separately with their advice of their committees to come up with the numbers.
Let me just suggest that we know that this is the big nut right here. So some of these others, like Senator mentioned,
Meals and rooms and real estate.
right, and we're not that far off on those numbers. So the big difference is really a business tax. So if we can get to a compromise on the business tax, I think we can move forward really easily.
How about if we put this one on hold, do the other ones, and then come back to the business tax?
Mr. Chairman, may I ask Ms. Stepp a question?
President?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Stepp, you had said that June is a big month for the state of New Hampshire. It's not quite the middle of the month, but we're getting close to it. What are your projections, percentage-wise or financially, for the rest of June?
So the only information I have at this point is the ranges that are here for fiscal year 25. As we get closer to the 15th, we will start analyzing the revenue to see what's been coming in, but it's too early in the month to know what we'll collect, unfortunately.
Okay, thank
A
you.
couple more days.
I just thought it might be helpful because,
Sure.
we have two members here arguing about pieces of percentages, and it would be good to have some sort of an idea where we are in June. And I think that would be very helpful as we move forward.
Should we ask you back Monday, the 16th?
You can.
Yeah.
Very good.
Would that be?
Yeah, I think we
beyond the
might
15th?
might have an idea and perhaps more direction. We'll see.
And some more figures.
Yep, it's more up-to-date figures.
Mr. Chair, I'll just say again, if you look at the agencies on the sheet that was provided by the LBA, the agency's colored sheet, the DRA low is still higher than the Senate's recommendation, and the high is even higher. So while we're arguing over roughly about $10 million in revenue, know that the revenue numbers coming in are probably going to be higher than the 170 we started with to begin with, which is again going to affect what happens cascading forward.
All right. We want to look at the other two you're talking about, meals and rooms or real estate, or you think they're pretty minor at this point?
That's kind of a minor, I believe, because if you look, well, let's look at it. Meals and rooms, 2025, we've got 333.9 and Senate does 334.5. Nothing, there's really nothing there. Look at 2026. What do we have there? 348 versus 353. I guess there's a $5 million difference there. And then a $5 million difference in 2027.
Well, it's 10 million bucks.
10 million total. Yeah. But if we look at the ranges, if we look at the DRA range, both the House and the Senate are on the high end of those ranges. So I don't know. Do we,
Yeah.
it's, I would be a little hesitant. I mean, you look at 2027, the House is at 361, the Senate's at 366, but the DRA range is 342 to 375. If DRA is correct on their low range, both the House and the Senate are 20 million too high. So I'm hesitant to change that number.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think if you look at these numbers and they're pretty consistent, the Senate looked like it was going for the middle, between the high and the low, something right in the middle. We're not at the upper high end, nor are we at the low end. We're right in the middle. And I feel very comfortable with the numbers that we have because we're not grossly overestimating. We are optimistic about our state and where we're going financially. And I agree that we're in a little bit of a rough spot right now, but I travel Route 93 almost every day to get here, and I see all the cars, and they're going up north. Let's go Friday afternoon, and you leave here at 4:30, 5 o'clock, and the highway on the other side is packed with people coming up here.
Yep.
I mean, people are coming here. I live at exit 4. And our shopping centers at exit 4 are packed on the weekends. Most of them coming from people from Massachusetts coming up here to spend money. They're eating out. They're just coming here to enjoy New Hampshire. And I think if you go above Concord, you'll see the same thing. People are coming up here. They're going camping. They're taking advantage of the hiking and all these other things. And so I feel comfortable with where we are for the meals and rooms. In fact, I think it might even go higher, but I feel comfortable right where we are in the middle. If we get more money, great. That's a bonanza. That's extra money we hadn't anticipated.
Yep.
But I'm not pessimistic. I just see a lot of people coming here.
Well,
And I think our numbers are solid numbers.
Senator Gray makes the valid point that if we do back of the budget cuts and the revenue comes a little stronger, then it takes care of some of the back of the budget cuts. And some of them are holding their breath and waiting for that. That's what they've done in
Yeah.
the past. Oh, we're not going to make it, this kind of thing. I remember
Yeah.
that in the past too. So anyway,
So, Mr. Chair, one thing I'll say is, in developing the meals and room tax projections, I met and made phone calls to places like, I talked to the corporate office at Airbnb. I wanted to know New Hampshire specific data about what does it look like? What is it, are we, as you know, we passed a law a while back, and Airbnb now is paying the proper rooms and meals tax that before there was a little more problem collecting. And what we heard from places like Verbo and Airbnb is that not only are they seeing growth in the market, they're seeing growth in the number of available properties, right? So they're increasing the properties, plus they're seeing growth on top of the increased properties. So again, their perspective was New Hampshire's been a great Airbnb market. Now that's probably what's contributing to our housing crisis. But that aside, in talking to the hotelers and the Airbnb types and is that they're very strong on New Hampshire. That again, they saw the same Kiplinger report that talked about outdoor states without a lot of outdoor activities being the recipient of a lot of people staying within the country, not traveling internationally.
any comment about Canadian tourists? We've seen stuff in the paper about.
So there was a 37% reduction that we saw in cross-border traffic. However, again, I did ask that specific question. They're not seeing the cancellations in the Airbnb market and in that short-term rental market. They're not seeing the cancellations happening. They're still very strong on New Hampshire. It's why they're actually actively trying to find more places, because people are coming to New Hampshire to be here. So I'm very confident in our number.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a suggestion? It seems like in my opinion, the two chairs of Ways and Means, the House and the Senate, need to get together and come up with numbers instead of this, because we can spend weeks just going
Yes,
back and
yes.
forth and back and forth.
If the two of you want to do it now, you can use the office back here.
I actually have to leave.
He has to go. He's not available. But thank you for staying.
Yeah, I wasn't
Well,
even gonna be able to come
Can
today,
we
so-
ask them to do it for
John
a
and I are
time
meeting
certain?
Monday or Tuesday. We have
Yeah.
some COCs going on. Over in Ways and Means.
Tuesday.
So we'll deal with it by then and get you the numbers.
Very good.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Did we actually schedule the meetings for tomorrow?
We did. 10 o'clock.
Okay, so that's also, something that can be worked towards 10 and, did we do 10 and 2, or are we gonna recess at 10 to get to a 2, or?
What would
Only
you
if
like, what would you
needed.
like to do?
Well, it's past 2 now, so you would have to recess it, I would guess, to a time certain to
Right.
fulfill the requirement,
Yeah.
so,
True.
all right,
But we're already scheduled for 10 o'clock here
thank you.
tomorrow. We haven't gone further than that. So if we're gonna, Representative McGuire?
Yeah, I wanted to unfortunately, Representative Janigian won't be available
Thank
the
you,
rest of this week, but
I'll have
yeah,
Vice Chair Yori come tomorrow.
okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Very good. All right.
So I just wanted to make the point that, I hope that Senator Lang is correct and the rosy picture is what happens. But I think the consequences of budgeting higher than what actually happens are very severe. And we've seen it in this year, right? We're draining the rainy day fund at the end of fiscal year of 2025 by a significant amount of money. And the problem is, if you budget up high, you don't find out about it right away, and you can't act right away, right? So the governor is required to act, but you find out about it 6 months in, a year in, and then all of a sudden, you'd have to cut sort of twice as much to get back to balanced as if you had budgeted at the lower level to start with, right? So I tend to think it's easy to add spending, and especially what we were just talking about, add it into these lapses and into the back of the budget cuts and that sort of stuff. But it's hard to make new cuts later on, right? And especially when you find out later on and you have to cut even deeper. So
one of the things that makes it hard for cutting later is the lapses, okay? And getting good lapse numbers, okay? Mr. Kane and I have had multiple conversations about lapses, and that right now, the $80 million that was projected in the governor's budget, I was told that it was 47 million plus or minus from lapses not coming in, and then the other was, other expenses, okay? So mea culpa, fiscal needs to do a better job and get better lapse numbers from the governor and better lapse numbers from the departments, and make sure that we are checking on the budget more than we were. And that's fiscal's problem to go solve, okay? And it needs to be solved, because we can't go through another budget year where the governor comes in at 80 million, the House budget comes in at 140 whatever million, and I was able to knock that down by taking some stuff and making it lapse and then reappropriating it to just under 100 million, okay? So that needs to be solved, but it's not in the budget that needs to be solved. It's in fiscal and what fiscal demands for accountability on the budget.
Very good. All right, let's move on to the side-by-side or the detailed change sheet for HB1. And take a look at what we can cross off. Thankfully, as we look at legislative branch, no change. Executive department, no change. Governor's Commission on Disability. You restore Class 50 funding for 2 part-time employees on the Governor's Commission on Disability. Did you have a reason why you thought you needed those people?
Certainly, we received an awful lot of input on that one, okay? And that with the money that was available, that we thought that at least restoring those 2 positions was a wise thing to do.
And we restoring these positions for 37,000 a year, 38,000 a year?
Yep, these are part-time.
Okay.
We're part-time, no benefits, all that stuff, to try and make sure that we're not the only state in the union that doesn't have a disabilities commission.
Go to my members from Division 1. Do you remember much about this decision?
Again, I mean, we have to cut everywhere, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we have to get a little here, there, and everywhere. If we have more money, you want to do 1 instead of 2 or something like that. I don't know. The other, I don't know the difference between the general and the other funds. So is this matching federal funds, or Melissa, do you, or Jack, you remember?
So the commission is under contract with, I forget the name of the education committee, but that comes from the Department of Education, and there are federal funds that go in. So, and that person's been in the position for, I believe, 5 years now. So it's just federal money that comes in from DOE.
Thank you.
Okay, so we could make each line half of what it is and have 1 person instead of 2.
No, because it's under a certain contract.
Oh, I see. All right. So,
All right, we'll come back to that later and see how much of a difference it's going to make. Information technology.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, just
Yes,
excuse.
Mr. Kane.
So anything where there isn't a change, just for now, like as we come back forward, tentative agreement, what we'll do is we'll shade out. So anything without a change, unless you tell us not to, we're going to just shade out. Anything that you come to where you want a little more information, if you tell us hold, we'll just put a hold in the box and then we'll come back with that. So
All right.
just wanted to let you know. So when you get the new sheet tomorrow, you'll have no changes unless
I guess
otherwise.
we'll hold these for now.
I would hold GOIT just in general because of the decisions you're going to have to make relative to housing appeals, human rights, child advocate, and board of tax and land appeals. There is on line 16 IT salaries and benefits, which is a standalone, and this was actually a net decrease of other funds from changing which positions the Senate was going to fund. So it's actually a net decrease on line 16.
So are a lot of these people on contracts that we,
The Housing Appeals Board and Tax Appeals Board, those principal people are on contracts. There is a provision in HB2 to change them to employees at will
Yep.
when their contract ends, which then if the legislature decides to make a change in the future, that change can be made with minimum impact. But taking the way that the House took them all out, you did away with the IT support and everything else, and you got to pay the people anyway.
right? These are the IT rather than just the boards, like this Human Rights Commission. How many of you read the audit?
I was here.
Worst audit I've seen in 16 years. I wouldn't keep funding them. But I don't know whether we'd have to keep the IT part or not.
I would hold the IT part until you make that final decision on
Yeah.
all these boards. Yes.
And Board of Tax and Land Appeals, why we made that decision was people can get on the board for $40, but it cost the government $6,000 for every case. Didn't make sense. It could almost go to court cheaper than that $6,000 that we were spending. So.
And part of what we did also in there is we had the BTLA and the Housing Appeals Board. We've got them so that they can actually share employees now, including the staff position. That the caseload for the BTLA looks like it's going to go up from some of the decisions that were made. And that the Housing Appeals Board, when I spoke to them, their caseload at 40, I said, well, it doesn't seem like they're fully employed, that they're not, you know, it's not a 40-hour-a-week job. And the response I get back is give them more duties. I don't need to give them more duties to spend more money in a year that I'm trying to cut all kinds of things.
Right.
So that's why there's language in there, like I say, to combine them together, at least administratively, and allow them to share employees. Because on the Housing Appeals Board, I did cut out the planner because the planner's contract ends at the end of June, okay? And said that if they need a third person to make a decision, they should pull somebody from the BTLA.
That's later on in this sheet.
It's later on.
Okay. And Department of Admin's, yeah,
So here's the problem. So the Housing Appeals Board, you're saving 570 on this page, but you're adding 900 on the next page, right? So it's a total of 400 more or something. They're only doing like 30 cases a year, so
yeah.
it's hardly worth it.
That's another reason we cut some of these boards
The
up.
fact is that two of those employees, their contracts do not end until after this biennium. And you've got to pay them anyway. There's a Supreme Court decision based on their positions that says we have to.
But I think
So-
that's in the numbers, no?
It was not, in the numbers that I got from the House, I was told that you had removed the funding for those people and that I had to pay them anyway, so I had to find the money somewhere. It was easier to put them back in and attach them to the BTLA. The Housing Appeals Board, in my opinion, should get down so that there is one attorney, okay? Backed up by people from BTLA. We should not have an engineer in there. We should not have a planner in there. And if you need an engineering decision, you ought to refer it back down to either the planning or zoning board and say, all right, there's already provisions in there where you can require the applicant to go hire somebody that's on your list and get that information so it can come back for a decision.
Okay.
But we can't do that right now with those contracts out there.
All right.
And that's why the provision in there to not make them classified employees is important to get to a position where we can make the changes
Sure.
that you would like to change.
Okay, let's just answer that question. Is it was the numbers on the House side wrong, or?
No, so the numbers on the House side were for the payouts of the people. So the numbers on page 2 is the governor's recommendation minus that one position that is getting eliminated, and the term is up June 30th, 2025. So it's less than the governor's recommended budget because of that one position being eliminated.
Okay. So, I guess I don't quite see that.
That the Board of Tax and Land Appeals we're talking about?
No, we're talking about the housing appeals.
Housing appeals.
The Board of Tax and Land Appeals, we actually took out the assessor position that was in there and the other part-time admin person that was in there that were not filled. So we didn't affect what they had. They just have not been able to hire an assessor at the rate that we are authorized to pay them. And so it didn't make sense to leave the positions in there if they were going to remain vacant permanently.
Correct.
Okay, but what we're seeing on these pages are differences between the House version and the Senate version, right? So keeping the Housing Appeals Board, the total difference is $400,000 more or something like that.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes.
Including laying off people and paying them off and all that
Yes,
stuff.
the new number is the number on page 2.
Yeah, okay. So,
Yeah, and you're going back and forth and getting the total.
right, so we knew that laying them off, we have to pay them off, right? Because the unclassified positions, but still, overall, it's a savings of 400,000. So that's all. No. Okay.
All right. And here's a surprise. Administrative Services, looks like they cut their budget more than we did.
So the Department of Administrative Services, you'll see 2 reductions. We're going to leave everything for now on DOIT on hold. Department of Administrative Services on row 19, Bureau of Court Facilities. There were some position swaps of other funds, which is funded from a lease to the courts, which actually results in a decrease of about 43.9 million. 43,900 over the biennium. And line 20 is a reduction in the transfers, contractual maintenance services. This is the other funds that the Department of Administrative Services receives from the courts. You'll see later on when we get to the judicial branch budget, a similar reduction in general funds to account for this. So this is the second part of a kind of a double count transaction.
So these were other funds, these first two
Correct,
items,
correct.
93 and 95. What were those funds coming from?
From the courts. It's a transfer from the court, so it shows up as other funds.
I thought the court was all general funds.
General funds mostly general funds on the other side, correct. So you're going to see when we get to the judicial branch, some corresponding reductions that match some of these.
You meaning increases or?
Decreases, because they're decreasing. It's what other funds and transfers from other agencies were one of those weird budget items where it ends up in a double count, because you have to show the people, Commissioner Arlington, spending the money on the Bureau of Court Facilities. You're going to reduce that, but at the same time, you're reducing how much they have to get from the courts. So it's one shows up as other, one shows up as general funds. In total, it's only the 242,000 plus the 43,000, but it's just a double count.
Certainly, we can accept decreases.
Yeah. So, yeah, we can agree to, if these are real increases and not,
They're
if these are real
decreases.
decreases
They
and not
are.
increase somewhere else.
Correct.
Jack and Melissa, do you remember any of this?
Yes, what Mike
did-
Kane was saying was accurate. This is the DAS, Bureau of Courts Facility, reached out to Judicial Branch to say we can make some reductions based on a position that wasn't funded correctly, as well as the lease and some other maintenance to the buildings. Judicial Branch agreed that those reductions were necessary. So it is a reduction of the transfer from the judicial branch to DAS, as well as the appropriation that the judicial branch gets for court facilities.
We're comfortable?
And you can see if you want to, if you turn to page 4, just to see the other half of this to ensure that the decrease in general funds, you can see on row 1, it's the total of the two transfers, the 286, 361, a decrease in general funds. So that back on Department of Administrative Services, this is a reflection of that money not coming from the
It's
courts.
the same money we looked at on.
Same. Yes, it is.
All right. So I guess, all right, we can agree to, any objection to agreeing to these cuts on lines 19 through 26?
No, 19 and 20.
19 and 20, correct.
19 and 20 are the other funds, okay. Yep, all right, we'll agree to those.
Ladies? Ladies? Great.
All right, so Housing Appeals Board, we come to that again.
We're skipping over that. I guess.
Skipping over that because we got to look at the other part of it.
You can hold that. And then on 26 is Conservation Land Stewardship Program. Other funds, the Senate moved it from being administratively attached to DAS to the Fish and Game Department.
Is this the one where they had the biologist coming out and making an assessment? Or is that coming later?
Don't believe this was the one, correct? No, that was a separate action in House Bill
Coming
2.
later, okay.
We were looking at the various decisions that we're trying to make happen quicker, okay? And part of those were right now, the people were in Fish and Game, and they wanted them in DES.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's what all this is about.
So we're switching it from general funds to other funds, which would be Fish and Game funds.
Wait a second, I gotta know on that,
So you'll get to something later on relative to the permitting and environmental review between Fish and Game and DES, Environmental Services. This is simply just a move. Currently, the Conservation Land Stewardship Program is administratively attached to Admin Services. This moves it to be attached to Fish and Game. So you'll see in Fish and Game's page later on in the detail change, the dollar for dollar offset to this line.
Yeah, so this is going to be spent out of Fish and Game.
No, it'll still be the same source of funds that it currently is now, just essentially have it be a part of Fish and Game rather than DAS. And this was a
That's
request and
what
approved
was
by
changed.
both the Fish and Game Department and the Conservation Land Stewardship Program. This was their request.
This is paid for by a fee, right?
Correct. There's a dedicated revenue source for this already, which is unaffected by anything here. It's simply just
Okay.
a relocation of where it is.
All right, so,
Reorganization.
Senate's comfortable on this one.
Yeah, that's fine.
so 23, 20, 26, we're okay with?
Yeah.
All right.
So 26 we have approved with the Senate proposal. On page 2, beginning on row 28 through 30. So row 29, Advocate of Special Education. This is a no-cost change. It's a reclassification of a Class 59 temp position to a Class 10 classified position. Usually you only see Class 59 temp positions that come through in fiscal. These are full-time positions some of these have existed for several years. This moves it. The only way to move those into Class 10 is through the budget process. So what the Senate did is to just move those funds from the Class 59 to Class 10 with no net change.
This is, okay, this something has to be done legislatively, which we're doing now,
Yes.
but no money change.
Correct.
All right,
I actually thought we had done this, but
maybe we
for
did.
some reason we
Yes,
didn't.
it's just a technical fix.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
All right, so that's okay. Advocate of Special Ed.
Yeah, on row 30, this is reallocating funds in each fiscal year between various class lines with a net zero impact. On page, if you wanted to go to it, I'm going to turn to page 136 on the compare report. You don't have to go there. I'll read the class lines that are impacted. If there are any. Yeah, so no net impact with these transfers. It's just a variation between class lines, but no difference between where the House and the Senate were.
All right. So line 33,
Oh, sorry. Line 33 is child advocate. So that's probably a bigger policy discussion you're going to get to when you get to House Bill 2, but you can discuss it now.
yeah, this is one that, it started off as a single person and then they kept adding staff. And some of the people we heard from in Child and Family Services said that they didn't like the person.
This is about sort of a half of our policy, and I think it's if we have this $1.5 million, I'm happy with it.
With what?
We can accept this if at the end of the day we figure we have this extra $1.5 million, right? So it's just a matter of what's our total money like.
We want to come back to this later and maybe eliminate it?
Again,
I think we eliminated it in the House.
right. They're asking for another $1.5 million back,
Yeah,
or 1.6, right? But
yeah.
yeah.
Senator Carson.
Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What we did was we abolished 4 positions. There were currently, I believe, there's either 8 or 9. It's kind of hard to, one
Yes.
was
It's
not
really
filled.
grown from a single person.
So-
Filled, but there wasn't.
And so we cut out 4 positions. We did make some policy changes. One was that the child advocate, instead of going through a very tenuous process through the Children's Oversight Commission, we changed it so that the child advocate would be appointed by the governor and council. We also made some other policy changes that we felt needed to be made. So I'm comfortable with this now. We do need this,
Yeah.
because what we ended up doing was we had all these other little commissions that were doing different things, and we consolidated it all into the Office of the Child Advocate. So I understand there's personality issues, but I'm looking at the office and the work that it does do, and it does do a lot of work that benefits the state of New Hampshire, as well as DCYF.
When you abolished the position, did you listen to the advice of who was the problem?
Not really.
Okay.
No, in fact, I had asked for some feedback and I didn't get any, so I went in and made the decision.
Yeah.
Which ones to
It
abolish.
should be noted that in my conversations with both the child advocate and the department is that there is a tendency for the child advocate to take over some of the responsibilities of the department instead of having the department do those things.
Yep.
And that is what I expressed. That is part of what the Senate President is alluding to when she says that she took away half their staff, is that we need this position to be the oversight, not the doer.
I guess we sent him a message.
Amen.
I think you did, Mr.
All right.
Chairman.
Sound good on our side?
All right.
Mary Jane?
No. You want the whole child advocate.
You want the whole 9 people? Okay. All right, we'll come back to that. All right,
Well, it's on hold because of the later stuff anyway,
all right,
Yeah.
anyway,
HB2.
okay.
So child advocate will keep on hold. Row 139 is Department of State. This is other funds. You'll see the net change between the two is about $22,000 in other funds in the Corporate Administration and Securities Division. Secretary of State requested to restore a position that was abolished in the House phase, and then restore a position under Securities Administration exams and abolish a position also. So you can see the net change between those two lines it's about $22,000 in other funds.
Minor.
You want to
Sure.
accept it? Okay.
Okay.
All right, Department of Revenue Administration, Audit Division. This
Audit
is-
Division, Department of Revenue Administration. So there was on row 40 is one change, which is a net zero cost, just swapping positions of 44,594 to 41,268. That was a technical change requested by DRA that was approved by the Senate. No change in dollars on that line. So that I would say that's a standalone, separate from what's coming up on the next row.
It looks like they've spent more, but you're saying it's not the case.
So on row 40, that's a standalone. That's just purely a change in positions behind the scenes in the budget. So if the House is okay with that, you wouldn't see any changes. It's just more when we report to Department of Administrative Services at the end, they have the correct position number. So that's a net zero on row 40.
Okay, and row 41.
Row 41, this is the multi-state auditors that the Senate added. They added 2 multi-state auditors, and I believe there's about $5 million or so in, we'll get to that on Schedule 2 of the revenue.
I remember doing this in previous budgets. How many multi-state auditors did they have? Did they say you?
So this would be for 2.
Commissioner Stepp
The
still
commissioner's
here?
probably here.
No.
No.
Okay, no, she's here.
So,
I can swap out with the
no,
commissioner.
she's got
Oh, she got it? All right, she's good.
Stay where you are. Commissioner Stepp, how many multi-state auditors do you have?
Hold on, let me give you a correct number.
Well, these positions.
Bring in money.
In the language
Yes.
that we talked about, we're offset the income that they're going to bring in, which is far exceeds this amount of money. And that's as best an estimate as we can get. So it did not make sense not to have these positions and forego the revenues.
Mr. Chairman, we also discussed our past experience, and I think the last time we did this was 10 years ago. And it did bring in.
bring in the money, as
It did
promised.
bring in money,
Well-
so we felt it would be worth it again.
This is talking about the auditors
Oh.
and not the tax.
Oh,
uh,
okay.
So to answer your question, Mr. Chairman, we currently have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 15 positions as multi-state auditors. However, 6 of those are vacant, and those are unfunded in the governor's budget and in the House version of the budget. So the Senate would be adding or refunding 2 out of those 6 vacant positions.
Do you think you can hire those people?
I am very hopeful. There are a number of people from an agency in DC that do similar work to what we do here in New Hampshire that have recently lost their jobs. And so I'm hopeful that I could generate some interest in our positions from those folks.
Very good. And how many multi-state corporations do we have in the state that we're going to go visit?
So those auditors typically audit the large Fortune 500 companies.
Right.
So they travel throughout the country in order to perform those audits. And so I think that we've got a pretty lean group here for doing the work that we do. So adding 2 more positions will
So
allow us
There are
to.
plenty of multi-state corporations that do business in New Hampshire, is my point.
Correct.
Okay.
Plenty.
All right, that sounds good. I know I agree with you. In the past, it has been profitable. All right, can we agree to this one?
Sure.
Agree to that.
I think we did it 2 years ago too, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, the problem is the vacancies.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. that's
All
good.
right. So when we get to Schedule 2 at that point, but there was $5 million. The Senate assumed $1 million in the first year, $4 million as a result of these positions. We'll keep that on Schedule 2 as is with this approved. And then the next item is the Treasury Department, row 44, distribution to municipalities. There's a corresponding Schedule 2, but this is the Meals and Rooms distribution. Remember, the House proposed 137 each year, which is what the estimate is for the current fiscal year. And the Senate put it back to the percentage of the Meals and
Yeah,
Rooms. And so-
this is money I was going to use for UNH,
correct.
this 11 million. So we could have, so we didn't have to cut UNH as much. That's where the money came from.
I found a couple of dollars for the UNH.
All right, well, we'll
We'll
put this
talk
one
about
on
that.
hold. All right, college savings,
College savings is unique. The program's unique. So you remember in UNH, the House had proposed $15 million a year. What the Senate's proposing is, they'll see in House Bill 2 when you get to it, is not to dedicate that $15 million to USNH from unique, but rather to deposit $6 million a year into the general fund. And we'll see this in House Bill 2. So you should probably want to hold on this item,
I was
but
looking
just
for
in
money on
general.
UNH, this was some of it.
That was some of that the House did. Yeah.
The complication on this one is that it also impacted the community college system, where some of the scholarships that they currently offer would not be able to be offered by taking this money.
True.
Okay, and that's why we wanted to look at it and make a difference. Since it's going to be on hold, we'll be able to discuss it at length further.
True. Okay.
Board of Tax and Land Appeals, this is a larger policy I believe you'll be discussing in House Bill 2. So it'd be my recommendation you hold on rows 48 through 50 until you have that further discussion. You can discuss it now, but as far as House Bill 1, that's all contingent upon what's going to happen in 2.
HB2.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've been warned by the clerk that we can't accept the fee changes that are associated with this because it's against House rules. So,
Again, there were tax increases is what it was.
well, on BTLA, there were fee changes. And so he wouldn't accept our committee of conference report if there's fee changes from the Senate.
That have not been voted on in the House.
That's right. So that's an issue.
That's our rules.
Yes.
And you'll get to that in House Bill 2. That's about $60,000 a year.
It's not a big number.
There are other fee changes we added in the House and were accepted in the House. If you kept those, not a problem. But we can't accept tax and fee increases that have not been voted on in the House because of our rules.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
there are reasons the Senate does not have similar rules. So if depending upon how the chair rules, the speaker rules, and whether or not there's a motion to override the decision of the speaker, that will all enter into this. Senator Rosenwald has a hand up.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I thought the rule was that something is germane if it's in either the House or the Senate version.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
not the issue. It's
No,
House Rule
very
50.
specifically to fees and taxes.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not the germaneness in that instance. It's fees and
Senator,
taxes.
we can talk about that after. The
Okay.
Yeah.
Senator Attorney read me the part in the House rules. I don't agree that it's a wise thing to do. And certainly the ruling of the chair does not have to be, exactly what the other people are interpreting this as. And that we're trying to get to a balanced budget here.
Yeah. So are we on page 3
So we're
now?
on page 3. So this is House Bill 1, New Hampshire Retirement System. There were no changes in Section 1 of House Bill 1, but there is a section in House Bill 1 that the House proposed that has a back of the budget cut of about $4.2 million in 26 and about $4.5 in 27 of other funds. In House Bill 1, in the sections, the Senate did delete that.
All right, we may need it back.
No, well, the problem with that one is that it is other funds. It is retirement funds. You don't get it back if you cut it. It's still the retirement system.
Yes,
okay?
but the employees get it back. Okay, this comes out of the corpus. They wanted a giant increase in their expenses from year to year. I spoke to the commissioner of labor, I guess it was, who's a member of the board of the retirement system. He's the one, he told me he was like the only person on their board who voted against their budget because they just went crazy with increases. I mean, it was like a 1/3 increase or a 1/2 increase
For administration?
for this new biennium compared to previous, how much they spend on their own internal expenses. And all those expenses come from the corpus of the retirement system, right? So it's straight on the backs of the employees. So it was way too high. We still gave them, I believe, even with this money, we gave them an increase, but it wasn't, up there. So, I find it hard to accept this.
It will certainly be a bone of contention as we go forward.
All right.
So we'll keep, that will remain on hold, and that will be, you'll address that when you get to House Bill 1, Section 11. As far as Rose, the next few on this for Category 1, no changes, developmental disabilities, no changes, Executive Council, no changes in the budget of OPLC. So we will gray these out for now. Everything is just tentative and can all come back to visit. But right now, there has been no changes proposed to those. So we will assume for today, the House and Senate are in agreement on just those
On
three.
those, yeah.
Just those
And-
three.
All right, so general funds, they've spent 4 million more than we did.
Yes, so for Category 1 in the budget, general funds was up by 4.3 million roughly. Other funds about 28.7, majority of that being the unique funds that are budgeted under Category 1 as opposed to budgeted under Category 6 when we get there. So.
All right, we'll move on to page 4.
Sure. Page 4, row 2. This is the second part of the agreement that you, or the approval you made under admin services. This is the actual general fund savings of 286,361. That matches up with the reduction you took earlier on in the packet.
The court didn't argue about this?
No, I believe they work with DAS to come up these figures.
All right. Okay.
Note that Commissioner Allinghouse is shaking his head up and down.
And I'm looking at Melissa too. All right. Guess,
Okay. So that's a approval of row 2. Row 3, these are all working out differently. They're all in Superior and Supreme Courts under Counting Unit 1880. On row 3 was a decision made by the Senate to add $554,910 to restore the Goffstown and Hooksett courthouses.
I think you had the money.
Yes, sir.
We added, with increasing their filing fees, which hadn't been increased in forever, I think we added 4 million.
Mhm.
And I guess you kept that fee increase.
I think we did.
So we're giving them a little relief on some of the cuts we would have made otherwise. Does that sound right, Melissa?
So the House did the back of the budget cut. These requests here for the Supreme and Superior Court and the court security, these were requests made from the judicial branch, and those occurs cut in the efficiency budget, so before it came to the House. So they came to the Senate and asked for these to be restored. The Senate wanted to restore the Goffstown and Hooksett Court, but if you add up line 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, those total the fee increases that occurred in the House, which is about $5.4 million.
But, so they made these because of the governor request.
Yeah, in their efficiency budget, they did a 4% decrease to their budget in the.
And now they're
In the
asking
efficiency
how much
budget.
of it back? It's not the whole 4%?
This is not the whole 4%. I don't have the exact percentage, but the exercise was to increase the funding to match the fee increase that occurred in the House, which was 5.4 million for the fee increases that you
So-
had discussed.
So we paid for this in the House with what we did.
It's offset by the fees, the court
Okay.
fees.
What they did was, we put the fee increase in the general fund and used it elsewhere, and now they're using it in the court.
We've already, so we're double using this money,
Well, no, I mean, it's just,
but they're putting it in the court.
this is extra spending for the court, and the other big one is line 8 here, right? So
Yeah.
that's the back of the budget cut. So this is I don't know, an increase of 12 million or something for the,
If you take away the back of the budget cut.
for the judiciary.
All right. In a lot of this court security and other things, we were told that all of these duties would fall back on the counties and the
Sheriffs.
towns.
Yeah.
And so in trying to restore the room and meals and trying to restore this so that we're not affecting the cities and towns as much, that is certainly the reason that I voted for this.
I don't
So
remember any cities and towns providing security for a court.
if we don't provide them otherwise, then who's going to provide them? You're not going to have a court session without security there.
Well, they were on their own going to cut the scoffs down and hooks at courthouses because I don't think they had that much.
That was in their efficiency budget, as I remember, but was not a thing that they recommended doing.
I remember a few years ago, we looked at courts that were funded 5 days a week, security, administrative, and the judge was only there a day a week or half a day. We said, why even bother?
Well, because the clerk of the court is there, and a lot of the business that has to be transmitted can be done by the clerk, and transmitting that to the judge, no matter where the judge is.
And so then we did it so it could be done computer-wise and didn't need to have all these courthouses open. I think they did close some then.
Well, right now, again, this is going to be one of those things we will continue to discuss.
All right, we'll come back to that then, but
So we can put judicial branch on hold. It also is depending on where you end up on revenues. That's going to
Yep.
impact the decision.
Yeah,
So
that's
for now, we're going to
exactly.
put those on hold. No change on Department of Military Affairs and Veteran Services under row 10.
good.
No change in House Bill 1 relative to agriculture, markets, and food. So in the budget. On row 16 or row 17 is the back of the budget reduction in the justice, initially about 7.9 million in 26 and 6.8 in 27. The Senate deleted that back of the budget reduction based on their revenue picture. So again, this is probably one you want to hold until you know
See
where
how
your
close
revenues
it
are.
is.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about this if
Sure.
you
All
don't
right,
mind.
let's
So,
go ahead.
I originally made a study of what did each of the departments spend 6 years ago versus today.
Good.
And the Justice Department, which is what we're talking about here, they increased their spending. Let's see, where is it here? Judicial Council, Justice Department. So 6 years ago, their fiscal year 2019 adjusted authorized was 11 million. In this governor's budget, it was 22 million.
Wow.
Okay, that's general and education funds, right? General funds. Total funds was up, looks like 13 million. So in both cases, we're talking about a 12, 13 million increase. It's a huge increase.
Yeah, almost doubling in 6 years.
And what it turns out is a lot of it was there were grant programs that were started by the federal government, then they stopped funding them, and then we put them in our budget, the governor put them in our budget for them to continue, right? And that's what this number reflects. Originally, I was just going to cut the grant programs, but they talked me into making it a back of the budget just to give them some flexibility if there was one little grant they wanted to continue and so on. But the point is, we're talking about spending that the federal government doesn't even want to spend, right? I mean, who's more profligate? Is if the federal government decides to cut something, I mean, why should we pick it up? I mean, that didn't make any sense.
Sometimes
to me,
there's an agreement. In order to get the first grant, you have to agree to keep funding it.
Yeah,
so many
I was
years.
not told that that was the case. I was
All right.
told that we could cut this. But in any case, that department in a very short period of time has had a huge increase in their budget.
All right, so
So
do
again, in this cut, the Attorney General Office identified several programs they were going to have to basically suspend. One of which was the Internet Against Crimes unit that does the investigations for crimes against children. In your county attorney offices, we have our victim witness coordinators that help the state align what's going on with the victim to what's with the perpetrator. Again, helps with reimbursements. These are all programs that end up coming down to your local counties that are providing. One of them was the CACs, the Child Advocacy Centers that help the most heinous crimes, which are sexual assaults against children, and providing basically what's law enforcement services. They do clinical interviews with victims of sexual assault that have a very required protocol because of the fact you can't lead the witness, you can't lead in these interviews. I know as a child sexual assault investigator how much the CACs do to help prosecutions of people who have violated children. So the problem is they're stuck in a place of we have to keep our attorneys going. And so when you put that back of the budget cut in, all of those grant programs that the representative just spoke about were the things that were put on the line, which are critical to our local counties and county attorney offices. So again, our victim witness coordinators, our sexual assault people that are working with victims, Internet Against Crimes, those are all programs that were put on the chopping block. And I don't think we want as a state to be putting those programs on the chopping block.
But somehow we got along without those programs 6 years ago or 10 years ago or whenever they got started by the federal government, right? I mean, we've had criminal justice for 200 years, and somehow this thing that started last week, we can't cut. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me.
Senator Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I chair the Commission on the Oversight of Children's Services. And I think if people knew the number of cases that the state deals with, dealing with the victimization of children, beginning with infants. Infants and toddlers is the largest growing group of people that are being sexually assaulted. Yeah, it's very ugly, and I would agree with my colleague that these organizations do an incredible amount of work. The internet has been around, but people have found new ways to victimize others using the internet, and that includes for sexual purposes. And that's why it is so important that we keep some of these organizations going, because they're serving to protect kids. I mean, who thought when the internet became available for everybody? I mean, I've been in the legislature since 2000, that we would even have to worry about something like this. But if you look at policy that was passed, we just today concurred with the House concurred with the Senate with the use of AI that is being used to victimize people. And we're going to a committee conference on another. And young men and young women are being victimized sexually through this. I mean, people get really sophisticated in their depravity. And I really feel that these things are very, very important. They cross over town lines, county lines, over state lines. And we need to be there to protect our citizens from this type of crime. And these things are something that we really need to have in place. It's money well worth spent. Thank you,
All right,
Mr.
we'll
Chairman.
put that on hold. Human Rights Commission, again, like I said, worst audit I'd read in 16 years.
In human rights, you'll have some changes in House Bill 2. You probably want to put this one on hold until you have further discussions. No change in banking department on row 24. Those are other funds. Those are the same. If we go to page 5, this is again a policy discussion, a difference between the House and Senate relative to public employee labor relations and the Personnel Appeals Board. So probably more discussion on this one, but if you want to talk about it now,
So what did you change? You added some IT? Sorry. You added some IT, or is that what it is?
Some of these positions, as I remember, and I don't know whether it applies to this one, we're using personal computers, home computers, but as we group them together per the House, then we needed to provide them the IT services so that the people that were all grouped together would be equal, and that we are paying for the internet, we're paying for 365, we're paying for all of that.
Okay.
So
right,
to
so
have them
yeah.
use their own computers or their own systems made it difficult to share documents, made it difficult to do other things. So
Right. This sounds reasonable.
Okay, Insurance Department.
okay. So we're going to tentatively approve, to correct me if I'm wrong, 28, 29, and 30.
You guys okay? Okay.
Are we in favor?
28, 29, and 30 on page 5.
Yeah, not a lot of money.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Insurance Department on row 32, administration. This is funding a position at insurance. As you know, insurance is other funded through
Right.
assessments on companies.
Self-funded. in effect.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Approved without objection.
Okay.
We're good.
Liquor Commission, again,
Yeah.
mostly self.
So labor, no change. We're going to assume that approved. Liquor Commission, this is the enforcement, elimination of enforcement. The House eliminated enforcement. The Senate restored the enforcement division to a certain point and then added it back of the budget reduction you can see in House Bill 1 section. So if you wanted to discuss that.
All right. So we're no longer in the era of Al Capone, right? So somebody licensing and collecting the beer tax and doing all that sort of stuff doesn't have to wear a badge and carry a gun. That's the issue here. Those are very expensive positions, and they're needed elsewhere. We have a huge need for corrections officers, for police officers, and so on. And so the people going out, inspecting restaurants, collecting the beer tax, collecting, just doing licensing and licensing renewals of liquor licenses and all that, don't have to be police officers. It's that simple.
Yeah, which is, what we agreed from that audit from years ago. 300 pages of it. And some of the follow-up told us that they were more concerned with sobriety checks than they were with going and checking on places that served liquor.
Representative Carson, Senator Carson.
Thank you. If you think about the places that serve alcohol, sometimes you can go into a situation where there might be trouble. And I think that's why they license them. They make them go through police standards and training. They carry weapons. I had a talk with my police chief in Londonderry, and they were very concerned about this because they don't have the personnel to go into these bars. They just don't. We tried to add personnel this year during at the municipal budget, and everyone turned it down. No, they want to keep the municipal taxes low and not hire additional police officers. So they felt that this was an unfunded mandate on municipalities.
Really?
Because
Hadn't heard that one before.
well, I'm just saying what I was with a conversation. So I think this one needs more thought, and I think we should probably hold it. I understand what you're trying to do, but I think to just wipe out, especially with enforcement,
Well,
I think
there's
is a problem.
1,400 places that serve liquor.
Mhm.
And there's, 15 or 20 of these officers?
Mhm.
So the likelihood of them ever being in a bar when the fight started is pretty remote.
And they don't go to a place just one at a time. They go in groups of 3 or 4. You know what I mean? So yeah, they in any given bar, they're there once a year or less. I don't know, but it's.
And that was another reason we didn't like it. There were some bars they didn't cover. There was one they covered 35 times.
Mr. Chairman, do you know who does the investigation if a complaint is made? Is there a separate?
This is the group.
Okay. So then.
But this is everybody. It includes the office people who collect the beer tax. There's like 5 beer distributors, and they audit them and they get checks every month and that sort of thing. But yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I understand what you want to do, but I think that this is really a large policy policy decision. And I don't know if we can actually do that now through the budget. I think that if we're going to start looking at who's going to do what and who's going to enforce it, who's going to investigate, I think that's a larger conversation with the Liquor Commission, and I don't think it's something that we could probably do within a week.
Well, we based it on a very extensive audit from 4 years ago.
I was gonna ask if that was the one that was done 4 years ago. Okay. So may I ask, I mean, it was done 4 years ago, nothing was done with it. Why now? Is it just because of the budget, that money is tight?
That was
or-
the House position.
Okay,
Senate put the people back in,
yep,
and we're kind of still sticking with the House position.
okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may. So again, you know, we also just passed a bill that the House passed as well that moved enforcement of our vape tax over to liquor enforcement.
Which tax?
The vape
Vaping.
tax,
The vape
how,
tax.
how we had a commission last year that I chaired that was talking about people who were not paying the vape tax. We have a huge amount of vape going on. The problem was we had auditing and enforcement over at the DRA. And DRA was uncomfortable walking into businesses and confiscating product and dealing with businesses. And they wanted to keep the audit component, but they wanted to give up the enforcement component. And they felt that that would lead to better collection of taxes. There was in the commission, there was significant discussion around that. Now, mind you, both the Senate and the House passed that bill, and it's going to the governor's desk to say that the liquor enforcement shall be the one that does the enforcement of the vape tax here in the state of New Hampshire. Add to that, when you think about what these guys do and what they're responsible for, right? It's not just the bars. It's every licensee, your grocery stores, right? These are the people that also assist with doing stings for underage buying in the state to make sure that licensees are compliant and they put people out there. They go on site at 10 o'clock at night to make sure a bar's operations are meeting the regulatory requirements. I don't know if you've ever been in a bar at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or 1
They
o'clock
were
in the
even
morning.
accused of using 17-year-old undercover people.
So aside from that, again, the idea of putting people in a position where they're dealing with intoxicated persons who they now have to shut off because the bar is doing it is over serving, and the liquor enforcement walks in and says you have to shut that guy off. If you don't think that's going to turn into a fight and into an argument, into a discussion, not having a law enforcement officer present to make sure that that occurs. And to the Senate President's point, the idea that we're going to now rely on local law enforcement and push down and say, you guys now have to start enforcing over service in your local bars and not have licensed law enforcement or certified law enforcement officers providing that service. As a former cop, and to the Senate President's point, they aren't hiring a lot of cops, and we can't hire a lot of cops. And to now put more requirements on them are just problematic to boot. So again, I know that I supported this position in the Senate because the ability for these guys to go out and enforce our liquor laws, make sure our licensees are being properly regulated, is you have to have a cop to be in those positions. So having some civilian on the side of the road telling a bartender to shut somebody off that's going to turn into a fight is problematic.
It's the problem is overblown, right? There's like 19 officers and they make 2 arrests a month or something in that ballpark. So
And when I read the reply for the audits, they were coming to fiscal regularly. None of them ever talked about stopping a bar fight. They talked about being on the side of the road to rescue somebody that crashed. That was the reports I was getting, and saving someone's life that passed out or something. But none of them ever talked about in these reports I got about having to break up a bar fight or arrest somebody for starting any of those. Anyway.
All right, the Senate position is that this is $6.2 million of other funds that we believe in our position, so it's going to have to go on hold for
Yep.
further discussion as we go along.
All right.
And on the next agency is Department of Energy. These are other funds. This is actually an unfunding of a position at the Department of Energy, savings of $265,000 over the biennium.
very good.
Okay. Sounds we can agree with that.
Okay. Next, on
HLS nonprofit.
sorry, Department of Safety. Yes. So row 45 is HLS nonprofit security grants. This is just these are federal funds. It's just a shifting class line, moving $30,000 in each year from 72 to 50, which a no net impact in all federal funds.
What does HLS stand for?
Homeland Security, is it, Mickey?
Homeland Security? Thank you. Okay.
46 and 47 go together. This is the communications section. So this is the Senate's proposing to fund this Department of Safety communications section with E911 funds in the amount of about 2.9 million over the biennium. That resulted in general fund savings of $2.9 million. You can see on row 47.
Does this involve a new tax?
It does not.
This is money already coming in the phone company.
That's correct.
And it has a dedicated fund that has this kind of money in it? Is it-
Yes, the E911 fund has a significant balance in it.
They're not asking for uniforms.
Look at
Okay.
Representative Murphy.
You might want to understand why that's in there.
Huh?
You might want to understand why that's in there. I'm not asking what the House. I assume this is what the House.
No, this is a new thing from the Senate.
Senate E911, but if you want the Senate to explain
This
it.
isn't related to our splitting up that funding half between general.
Portion of it is, Mickey can explain kind of where the Senate was and where the Senate, where the House
Yeah, I
was.
think she did explain.
Okay. Yeah, why don't you sit where, Joe?
Speaking of the sweep that you were going to do on dedicated funds, what the Senate did is we said it's going to be up to the governor to, in each of the fiscal years, about 13 million, as I remember, that they
16
need
a
to come
year.
out
Yep.
of whatever funds, including those dedicated funds, instead of sweeping it, because on many of the funds that we started to look into, we found that there was federal dollars, which would preclude it. There was department after department after department that came in and say, I should be excluded for this reason. I said, let the governor sort it all out, okay? And that, I put that on the governor and took out the 5% sweep.
That was my idea, and I thought it would yield more, but I didn't realize how many of them were restricted.
And we can talk, that will be in House Bill 2. You see those difference. This one, I think Representative Irv can give kind of a background of where, or Mickey, where the House was when it came to the request to swap this funding. So I'll just pass that over to
Which
Mickey.
line are we on?
That's on rows 46 and 47 on page 5 of the detailed change.
So there is an accounting unit under the Emergency Communications Division at Safety that is funded right now with E911 funds. The governor's budget in House Bill 2 proposed some enabling language in House Bill 2 to allow for the E911 fund to be used for state communication system. That practice has been budgetarily been done for a decade or more. This would have made the statutory language there to make that a compliant decision. What the House Division 2 decided to do was to allocate some of those costs rather than the, excuse me, the E911 fund picking up the state communications, the general fund do so. So the numbers you see here on line 46 and 47, House had proposed splitting that accounting unit to be 50% E911 funds, 50% general funds. The Senate has reverted that back to the way that the governor had proposed and the way that the law has been and the budget has been for several years to be 100% E911 funds.
Just to be clear, Mickey, the law has not been that way, right?
Sorry, the budget law has, the statutory law has not been enabling. So House Bill 2 in the Senate, and it'll be as part of your House Bill 2 when you get through your side-by-side here. That language was put back in by the Senate. It was removed by the House.
So the discussion, if I may, Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
the discussion related to should the E11 system be picking up the total cost of the state radio system? And as part of that, and it was sort of agreed that probably what we couldn't get information on at that point in time, and apparently we got no further information, was how that split might work out. So we chose an arbitrary 50-50 split. But their concern was that the E11 system itself might run out of money. And you may know that we recently raised the E11 fee, I guess, the tax, whatever we call that. So that was the reason for doing the split.
Thank you. All right, anything further?
Well, it's up to you guys to decide if you're okay with it, as long as you know what's going on. It's basically general funds. In our budget, it's half general funds and half other funds. And what they're doing is making it all highway funds, basically.
So they saved some general funds,
They save some general funds, yes, exactly.
2,919,000. That's good. All right. Any objection to keeping this? All right, so this is done.
46 and 47 we'll have as approved.
All right, finished page 5. We've got several more to go.
Get several more.
We've got a request to finish at 4:30. We'll be back at 10. We've done okay for the couple hours we had, and we've made some progress. And obviously, we're getting a little closer on revenue. We'll have the vice chair from Ways and Means here tomorrow. We want to go further into that. And seems like a good place to break and announce that tomorrow at 10 o'clock, right here, same people, same stuff, starting with either we may go to the revenue or we may just start on page 6.
Yeah. I asked Lottery to be here at that time, but I haven't heard back, so.
All right, so we may get lottery involved in the revenue and see what they come up with, but appreciate you all being here and obviously you've all done a lot of study, and I see Representative Lang runs around interviewing everybody, and so.
And I'm assuming that it's okay to leave our materials
Yes,
here on the desk instead of transporting them.
yes, we shouldn't need to drag them back and forth. Place will be closed up. And they're not going to move these tables till we're done.
And I'm adjourned. We're adjourned.
Committee of conference for HB1 and HB2 is adjourned.